So this is sending a green right now. But the problem is, I need it to go to here to be worth a damn. Let me come down here. So now that's a green.
I have been working on Hex-a-Decimal for over half a year now, and through pushing out frequent updates and doing constant playtesting, I have learned a lot about how players learn game mechanics and how to craft an engaging user experience for my puzzle game. After getting positive feedback on the last devlog, I'm excited to show you all what I've learned since and how I've been improving Hex-a-Decimal. In this video, I'll pick up where the last devlog left off, documenting the development of versions 5, 6, and 7. I will also share what I've learned for any indie devs looking to improve their player experience, and talk about the critical role playtesting had in the game's development. This is Hex-a-Decimal Devlog 2, Improving My Dream Puzzle Game. Version 4 is where the last video ended, and as of writing the script, it had released 3 months ago. By the time I had finished recording the last devlog, I already began work on version 5. Version 5 was the audio update. There were already sound effects for the level select screen, and when you complete or fail a puzzle, but version 5 added sound effects to the levels themselves. Take a listen. I also added volume to the options menu, with separate settings for the soundtrack and sound effects. This would mark the first appearance of what I would later call dials, which would allow the player to choose one of 6 values to set a variable to. These would end up being used in the options menu for various settings, but in version 5, they're just used to set the OST and sound effects volumes from 0 to 5, with 5 being 100% volume and 0 being fully muted. The most important audio-related addition to version 5, however, is the soundtrack. When I first made Hex-a-Decimal for a game jam, it included a simple OST made by me in the short time that I had. It was made in a website called Beatbox and worked pretty well, but I knew that if I wanted to continue working on the game, I would have to remake the soundtrack. So for version 5, I would make a whole new soundtrack in FL Studio. Now, I could make an entire video about how I designed the original soundtrack and a whole other video about how I remade it, but I'll keep it short for this video. I wanted to remake the soundtrack in FL Studio because I felt like the current OST at the time was too fast-paced and the soundscape didn't mesh well with the puzzle game I wanted to make. When making the new soundtrack, I copied a lot of the motifs from the old tracks, and by combining them in different ways, through different instrumentation and composition, I attempted to go for a more ethereal, slower, not necessarily gentler, but definitely more thinking-oriented soundscape. And the feedback I've gotten since showed that it worked. Going back to talking about version 5 in general, Hex-a-Decimal's sound design has been one of its most consistently praised elements, and I'm glad that I took the time to focus on it for this update. Of course, there were many other changes made, and you can read all of them here, but as always, if you wish to gain early access to information regarding Hex-a-Decimal's development, I'd highly recommend joining my Discord server, link in the description, as you'll be the first to know when a new update comes out and what I'm working for on the next update. So, after finishing version 5, it was up to me to decide which direction Hex-a-Decimal's development would be heading next. After I publish a new Hex-a-Decimal version, I often take a short amount of time off development. This amount of time typically ranges from a day to about a week or two. This is beneficial for many reasons. It gives me a moment to enjoy the feeling of having done something before going back in and getting caught up in the desire to do more. It gives me time to think about what features I'd want to add in the next update. It prevents possible burnout from harming the project, and overall, stepping back from Hex-a-Decimal after a major release helps me come back ready to get the next update out, full of productive spirit and new ideas. Version 6 was the exception to this rule. Previous updates all had a major theme. Version 3 was mostly a visual polish update, version 4 was a gameplay overhaul update, and version 5 was the audio update. Version 6, however, had no direction, at least in the beginning. I wanted to make my game look better, so I started by increasing the thickness of the tile highlights and added a CRT filter. But with nothing major to show for the update, nothing to give it an identity, I went back to the reliable method of making the game better. I started playtesting again. In hindsight, version 6 ended up being the quality of life update. Tools were added and changes were made to help new players learn the game better and to give all players a smoother experience. This took the form of an addition to the level menu that consolidates simulation controls to one simple row of buttons. You can start and stop, speed up and slow down, and new to this update, you can pause and step. Now, players can go through their solutions one cycle at a time to be able to identify exactly what's happening and where the problems are. Other than that though, the changelog consisted mostly of bug fixes and other minor things. Well, not entirely. See, this is a devlog after all, and in a game as complex as Hex-a-Decimal, every bug fix is an uphill battle. Let's use this one as an example. Fixed a bug where breakers that were powered and tripped on the same cycle would let through a signal under specific circumstances. So, how does one fix a bug in Hex-a-Decimal? Well, firstly, the bug needs to be identified. You can't fix a bug that doesn't exist, and false flagging intended behavior as a bug could be catastrophic. To identify this bug, I can open up version 5, the version that released before the fix, and create a setup that powers a breaker with its intended color and trips it on the same cycle. The simplest way to do that would look something like this. So, now that we have our setup, we can use our knowledge of how the game should work to predict the result, and then see if the game's calculations match our predictions. Basically, we're using the scientific method, with the caveat that if we do find a difference between the prediction and the game's calculations, we would then have to figure out which one needs to be corrected, as our predictions could be wrong, or the game's calculations could be wrong. Now, since we know there's a bug, we can make our prediction accordingly. The breaker is designed to work like a conveyor, except it is assigned a color. Once it receives a signal of a different color, it trips and immediately ceases activity. If a breaker ever passes on a signal after being tripped, it is proof that the breaker does not work as intended. Now that we have our hypothesis, let's start the simulation. Now, you might think that we just disproved something, or that the breaker working as intended in this example is in some way surprising. But this is the reality of bug fixing something as complex as Hex-a-Decimal. If we go back to the changelog, the breaker only acts this way under specific circumstances, and as it turns out, simply swapping which signal is red and which signal is green produces this result. If we go frame by frame, you can see visually that this isn't supposed to happen. The breaker clearly trips on this cycle, only for a signal to magically appear on the next one. Of course, that's just the start, really. The next step is finding the code responsible and rewriting it to produce the desired behavior. This is more easily said than done though, and I'll probably save the code related ramblings for another time. Anyway, that was version 6. Once all the quality of life improvements and bug fixes were added, it was ready to ship, and I was feeling quite proud of myself. So, after all that, you might be thinking to yourself, what's next for version 7? All throughout Hex-a-Decimal's development, I have been playtesting. I playtested it when I was first making it for a game jam, more so than any other game I have ever made, and when I decided to continue development after the jam ended, I never stopped playtesting. I playtested every version in varying amounts, and it helped me smooth out the learning curve, get ideas, and generally assure that I was on the right track. I asked friends to play my game, I asked people online to play my game. It was somewhat of an addiction, sure, but you can't deny the results. So why do I bring up playtesting here specifically? Well, because version 7 is when I added arguably the most important feature that only like 2 people will ever use. Let me tell you the story of how accessibility settings found their way into Hex-a-Decimal. So, I had recently released version 6, and I had also recently met a new friend. I had invited my friend to hang out at my place, which included playtesting the latest version of Hex-a-Decimal, since playtesting is obviously important. They found the game to be enjoyable, which is intended behavior, and I was happy that I had made a game that they liked. In fact, they liked the game so much that in that single session they had played all the way through the first 20 levels. Things changed when they got to level 20, however. You see, my new friend was colorblind, and couldn't differentiate between the green and blue colors used in the game. I, having known them for less than a week, was unaware that they were colorblind, and we had a short discussion about how to fix the game so that they would be able to play it. I don't remember what they suggested, but I suggested a color picker where the 3 main colors in the game could be changed to any combination of the 6 primary colors: red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow. They liked the idea, so I procrastinated for like a week before implementing the color picker idea, and also fixing the options menu to allow for sub-menus. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, but I wanted to expand the options menu in some way in version 6 to make room for the new settings, but ended up just shoving the CRT settings into the only empty space left in the current options menu. But obviously with the accessibility settings, I had no choice but to expand the options menu, which I did by adding submenus. Anyway, this is what the accessibility submenu looks like, and it works as advertised. Admittedly, a lot of the color-related systems needed to be redesigned to allow for the customization, but it was 100% worth it. Colorblind accessibility is probably the most important feature in Hex-a-Decimal that has literally no effect on over 90% of the people who play it. Other than that, the version 7 changelog was a lot of minor things, but I just wanted to highlight how important it was that I added colorblind accessibility, because now my friend could play, and anyone who is colorblind could also play the game, and I am very happy for that. It has been a quarter of a year since my last devlog, and looking back at that last video, the game has changed significantly. My methodology, however, hasn't. I still think playtesting is easily the most important part of game development, and it's important to do it right, do it early, and to do it often. If players need to understand something about your game, don't leave it up to chance. Playtest and refine your tutorials until you can be absolutely sure that anyone who picks up your game will learn how to play. And also remember that in any good game, the player is always learning, so don't fall into the trap of just playtesting the tutorial. When I started making this game, I needed to constantly watch over my playtesters and answer their questions. But now, I'm recommending Hex-a-Decimal to people who don't typically play puzzle games, only for them to come back talking like they just discovered the sequel to crack cocaine. Speaking of, you may have noticed the background footage for this devlog. I recently joined a community on Discord where indie devs and small streamers could interact. And thanks to my salesman charisma, I have been able to, well...
Okay, we're gonna move on. This is one I played at the end of last week's dev game stream. It was super fun. This one is like the hard mode of puzzles though. I will give you that heads up now.
Seeing streamers play my game was an experience unlike anything else. Before this, I wasn't sure if Hex-a-Decimal was content friendly, in the sense that YouTubers or streamers would be able to easily make content out of the game. This is important since most people discover new games through watching YouTubers and streamers play them, so if YouTubers and streamers can't make content out of Hex-a-Decimal, its ability to find an audience will be limited. This goes for pretty much any game, so if you want your game to reach a larger audience, you should consider the role that YouTubers and streamers have in presenting your game to that audience. That's not to say that you should adjust your game to cater to YouTubers or streamers, which brings us back to seeing people playing Hex-a-Decimal on stream. Throughout Hex-a-Decimal's development, I have been watching people play the game, and watching people play the game on stream has made me realize that there's basically no difference. Streamers and YouTubers have audiences, yes, but by playtesting Hex-a-Decimal as much as possible, I unintentionally made a content-friendly game. So, if I had to give one major piece of advice for indie devs who dream of one day watching their favorite YouTuber play their game, while I haven't achieved that dream yet, I will say this. Content creators are just playtesters with an audience, and once you start thinking about it that way, everything will start to make sense. My humble hexagonal puzzle game was shaping up to be a hit. These past few months of development have solidified Hex-a-Decimal in my mind as a game with an incredible amount of potential. All I have to do is finish the game and sell it, and as it turns out, the roadmap for Hex-a-Decimal's development is as solidified as it could ever be. So, here's all the juicy details. I am currently working on version 8, and it's due to release by the end of the month. Version 9 will come out soon after, and that'll be it for the current iteration of Hex-a-Decimal. In my previous devlog, I mentioned remaking the game from scratch. I plan to get versions 8 and 9 out before about mid-November 2025, so I can start anew. I will also make a Steam store page for Hex-a-Decimal after releasing version 9, and once I have something to show, I'll make another devlog showing my progress. It took about 9 months to get Hex-a-Decimal from a concept to its final update, so I feel like it would make sense to spend another 9 months working on the Steam version before releasing it in all its glory, along with a free demo. Of course, I do feel like people will have questions. Why remake the game from scratch? Why not just upload version 9 to Steam? Since Hex-a-Decimal will be my first game on Steam, and I plan on selling it for a price, I feel obligated to provide something more ambitious. Luckily, over the course of Hex-a-Decimal's development, I have had many ideas which would simply be too hard to implement into the current iteration of the game. This is due to a variety of reasons, but if I were to, say, remake Hex-a-Decimal from scratch with all the knowledge and foresight that I have gained from working on the game so far, I would be able to add in all those ambitious features and, overall, make the game so much better. As for what those features are, you'll just have to wait for the next devlog to find out. So, yeah, that's about it for this devlog. I feel really bad about not getting this video out sooner, as I had originally planned to upload it during September, so it's a whole month overdue. Hopefully, the next devlog doesn't take as long, since I love making these videos and seeing people's reactions. Anyway, if you want to be the first to know the news when it comes to Hex-a-Decimal's development, join my Discord server. If you like the music used in this video, you can find the Hex-a-Decimal soundtrack on this channel. And if you like the background footage, be sure to show the streamer some respect, and tell them I sent you. The links to all these things can be found in the description, as well as a link to download Hex-a-Decimal. If you somehow watched this entire video without thinking about how cool you would be if you played Hex-a-Decimal, I would be very surprised, and considering how often I talk about playtesting, I'm sure you know what to do. I would extend this video further with an outro, but we both know that Wi-Fi of yours could be used for something better, like downloading Hex-a-Decimal, and I wouldn't want to interrupt that now, would I?